When was the last time that you were in your flow state? Have you ever been so immersed in something that you lost complete track of time and you felt one with the activity? Maybe you were cooking, playing tennis, or lost in an Excel spreadsheet. How about a brainstorming meeting? Every ideas and insights come in from out of the blue. And don't you just love it when things come together with a sense of ease? During these kinds of experiences, you were in flow. So this is what happens to the brain. Neuroscientists have discovered that in these moments, a cocktail of peak performance hormones are released, creating brainwaves conducive to the flow state. The neocortex amps up dramatically, increasing learning speed. And the prefrontal cortex temporarily shuts down. And this explains why we lose a sense of time and a sense of ourselves, key indicators that we are in the flow state. These are the neurobiological conditions that make creativity and outstanding performance readily available. Thank you. As a violinist, losing myself by getting into the music has been my answer for everything. I had no idea why, but it's how I overcame obstacles like shyness and audition anxiety. It's how I found fulfillment in my work, and it's how I learned to lead. Without the flow state, I never would have been able to play my best when I was the concertmaster of the Central Oregon Symphony. The concertmaster is the lead violinist and second in command to the conductor. And imagine if I was just sitting there going through the motions. What a huge disservice that would be for both the orchestra and the audience. I didn't have a choice. I had to get into the music. Nowadays, I work with organizations worldwide, teaching their leaders and teams how to get into flow on demand. It's a process that took me about a decade to discover, but once I figured out the steps, I could pretty much get into flow whenever I need it. It's like a superpower. And each of you has your own version of it. But the problem is, people aren't getting into flow very often. But when you do get there, you're in the middle of a challenge, giving it your undivided attention, and you are rocking your genius. And at some point you look up and you wonder, where's the time gone? And then you realize you're out of flow, and you don't know how to get back into that blissful state. And doesn't it seem like flow is the hardest to get into when you need it the most? Like when you're burned out, or out of your comfort zone, or being faced with constant interruptions? With all this in mind, you may be wondering, okay, well, how does a musician get into the music and into their flow state? Well, we have a hard time explaining it. We say things like, I feel it. And it feels like I'm singing. It just happens to me. And we expect musicians, athletes, and yogis to be in flow. We expect artists, writers, and revolutionary scientists to be in flow. Why don't we expect the same at the workplace? How many people are just going through the motions? Do you get through your workday and leave drained? Or do you get into your workday and leave energized? Contrary to public opinion, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he's the psychologist who coined the term flow, discovered that it's not just for athletes and people in the arts. His research has verified that the majority of people getting into their flow state are going through the business of their day-to-day lives, and here's why. The entry point of flow exists at the intersection of skill and challenge, which happens to all of us on a daily basis. So then why aren't more people getting into flow? What's the missing piece? Now, some of you are thinking, wait a minute, Diane, I get into flow every day. But I'm wondering, is that because you've been saving it for life outside of work? Like it's your reward for getting through the stress of it all? Many of you do get into flow during the workday, only to be interrupted by all kinds of things, especially quick questions. What if you could get into flow on demand? What if it's the key to increasing the meaning, joy, and fulfillment in your everyday life? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. And we may think that flow, it's esoteric, it's for the elite. It's certainly not for the workplace. Not true. Being in the flow state brings out the best in all of us. So if we're all wired for this optimal kind of thinking, you may be wondering, well, do I just have to sit around and wait for it to happen? Well, I had to ask myself the same question. I'm 15 years old, in my room, blasting the music. Not rock and roll. I'm listening to a violin concerto. And in my imagination, it's as if I'm the soloist standing center stage, pouring the core of my soul into every note I play. But back when I was in college pursuing a degree in music, I found myself playing in a lot of orchestras. And it was a real life experience where the music would just sweep me away. And it was the environment where all of my hard work, practicing, and passion would just magically come to life. So I decided to dedicate myself to becoming a professional violinist in a symphony orchestra. And I did a really good job. Not child prodigy good, but hardworking good. And when I sit down with people like you, we talk about what it feels like when we're doing our best work. It's pretty similar to what I experienced playing in orchestras. So after I graduated from college, I started to take auditions. And feeling bulletproof with my New York City violin training, I'd show up, check in, and make my way to the warm-up room. And the commotion, it's deafening. All my competitors are in there warming up at the same time. So I find my own little spot, take out my violin, I'm warming up, and despite all the noise around me, I find myself losing myself in the music. About 45 minutes later, Diane Ellen, next. So I leave the noisy warm-up room, and I step into the hallway, and it's so quiet. All I could hear is the fuzz in my ears. And my heart. So I walk out on stage, up to a solitary music stand, line of judges sitting in a row. And as I lift my violin to my shoulder and I bring the bow to the strings, the nervous quiver in my hand transfers itself into the bow, and it's now bumping and bouncing up and down. But that's okay, I'm a well-trained, well-rehearsed musician, so I play on. But I'm so distracted by the lack of control, I'm just going through the motions. And as for whatever happened next, I can't even tell you, because that's when the amnesia set in. What I do know is I left the audition early. What I don't know is, was it my choice or the judges? Am I the only one here who's been seen in public looking like this? What a far cry from my fearless childhood vision. I can't even get into an orchestra. Me, be the featured artist, standing center stage, pouring the core of my soul into every note I play? What a pipe dream. I wish I could tell you this was a one-time event. It wasn't. And the funny thing is that as long as I was in the practice room or at a rehearsal or during a concert, getting into my flow was as easy as turning on a light switch. But during my auditions, it escaped me. And because of this, I was at a high risk of living an unfulfilled life with my music trapped inside of me. What's going on with the greatness inside of you? Is it curled up in a ball, tiny, hiding out somewhere inside? Or is it so big inside you that it's spilling out into your everyday life? How about the people that you serve? What's going on with the greatness inside of them? Well, it was 10 years later, and somehow I've managed to stay in the game. In order to make ends meet, I'm scrounging for violin students in a very competitive teaching market, and due to my nerves, not only am I playing in freelance orchestras, I'm sitting last chair. It's like being picked last for dodgeball at the age of 34. Well, it was around this time when there was, I saw a job interview for a teaching job, and I decided for whatever reason I'm going to go for this. And I met the audition, and from out of the blue, as luck would have it, I find myself going to that place where all of my hard work, practicing, and passion magically come to life. I am so immersed in the music that underneath my fingers, it's like the violin is singing by itself. The students I'm teaching are responding really well to my spontaneous creative solutions. In the room, and it was a packed room, there were students there, parents, teachers, fellow musicians, and to my surprise, sitting right where you're sitting, Michael Gesme, the conductor of the local symphony orchestra. The day-long marathon felt like it went by in 5 minutes, and at the end of the day, they offer me the job on the spot, and I say yes. Yay! Back in college, I didn't have a name for it. But clearly, being swept away by the music was a sure sign that I was getting into my flow state. During my auditions, I got knocked off my game. But finding my flow was the answer. And whether I was a student, or freelancing, or teaching and performing in Central Oregon, I had the same training. I had the same talent. I had the same passion. It was in me the entire time. Accessing my flow is how I feel my best and perform my best and experience my deepest levels of fulfillment. It was December 1997 when I was scrounging for violin students and sitting last chair, but January 1998, I'm welcomed to Central Oregon with a full roster of violin students waiting for me, and that's when I found out it wasn't just a teaching audition. I was hired to sit first chair of the Central Oregon Symphony. Within a month, I went from last chair to first. Now, for me, fear was my issue. But a lack of performing our best, it's different for everyone. Yes, there are people who do choke up when they speak during a meeting. Yes, there are people who knowingly lower the quality of their work just to get through the heavy workload. And yes, there are people who entered the workforce with dreams of making change in this world who are now really disappointed with the lack of impact. I don't know what it is for you or the people that you serve, but just like me with taking auditions, we can get stuck trying to tap into our flow and into all of the goodness that's already in there. I was incredibly lucky that I slipped into flow during that audition, but I didn't have a system for it. And I remember thinking, well, that worked. So I would use my passion to get into the music as much as I could because that's how I had just found my confidence. But then I started to notice things. The more I got into the music, the better I played. And the better I played, the more I got into the music. It was this positive feedback loop, refueling me. Then I noticed that it was the same with my students, but just in a different way. The more I got into the music, the more they got into the music. It was a positive feedback loop between us, otherwise known as team synergy or group flow. Imagine little kiddos rocking it at the violin recitals. The students are inspiring each other to do personal bests. The parents dabbing tears from their eyes. Standing room only violin recitals? Are you kidding me? I never had to recruit. I never had to do sales. I always had a waiting list. Now, as far as my role with the orchestra is concerned, a leadership role, I may add, not a following role, the struggle is finally over. All of my dormant skills just came alive. And it was incredibly rewarding, finally, being able to take all of this training and put it to full use. And with hundreds of rock-solid performances under my belt, turning on that light switch and getting into flow became routine. Except for one concert. I was giving the pre-concert lecture, turn around, sit down, give a big cue for the music to start, and I can't move. My elbows are frozen. And while it's feeling like an hour, it's really only about a minute for me to regain the full use of my arms, but now there's a disconnect. I'm not putting any feeling into the music. It's like I forgot how. That can't ever happen again. My first thought was, okay, I'm having a transition issue, going from speaking to the audience into playing the violin. But it wasn't. It was really about this shift from out of flow into the flow state. I had to find a way to shift into flow and to be able to do it on purpose. So that night after the concert, I launched into a series of questions because I had to solve this problem. My reputation and job security are now at risk. And it was this process of self-discovery that ended up unlocking my flow. And it's a series of questions I've been asking ever since, which I found out later on has a direct correspondence to the latest flow state research. And with a system in place, I started to help other people. I've helped people to overcome fear of public speaking in one session. I've helped founders of startup companies to stand in front of these giant audiences where there's investor funding involved, and to be deep in their confidence and deliver these impassioned pitches. And I've worked with leaders to increase their influence and teams to find their synergy. And these are the results I want to teach you, so that you can drop into flow whenever you need it the most, anytime, any place, no matter how high the pressure. So that night after the concert, I'm sitting on the couch, I'm grilling myself with questions. Do get into my flow state in a variety of places. Happens the most right here on stage. But what am I doing? Well, I know I'm playing the violin. That's what I'm doing on the outside. What am I doing on the inside? My friends would say, well, hey, Diane, we are creating the music. And I'm like, I get that, but I don't know, it feels different for me. I feel like I'm sharing. I'm sharing the message of the music, and I'm sharing the experience. That feels right. Now, what about those concerts when I'm moved to tears? It's like the flow state on steroids. It always happens at audience sing-alongs. Something about a large group of people coming together through the music. Why is that so meaningful? Unity. That's what touches me to the core. When my elbows froze, all I could think of was, just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep moving. I bet if I had known to focus on sharing and creating unity, I could have gotten into the music. Well, there's nothing like the sting of embarrassment to give you a kick in the pants. And after all of this personal self-reflection, it ended up being a good thing. It's how I discovered my flow strategy. Sharing is how I shift into the flow state on purpose. Unity is how I can shift into it with purpose. So, Do you have to sit around and wait for a lucky moment to get into your flow state? Not when you can use your own unique flow strategy to tap in and unleash the greatness within you. I was giving a workshop on peak performance, and there was a manager there who flat out refused to give a status report at their annual company-wide meeting. And the issue with that was he fills the entire pipeline of the company. He's the land acquisition manager of a real estate developer, and his absence on that annual meeting stage does not give people confidence with what's coming down the pipeline. Well, it turns out where he gets into his flow state the most is bicycle racing. On the outside, he's dressed in spandex, riding his super cool bike. But on the inside, he is selflessly supporting his teammates as if their lives depended on it. And the team synergy lights his fire, and it's why he finds bike racing so meaningful. Knowing his flow strategy gave him a really good reason to stand in front of 250 people and give the status report. He wanted to support his coworkers and to create that team synergy. After I had given a talk to a room full of scientists, this woman, she comes over and she says, "How's this going to help me in the boardroom?" Well, where she gets into her flow state the most is in the lab. On the outside, what she's doing is working with her hands. But on the inside, she's discovering. And when I asked her a little bit deeper, I said, "Well, what does discovering mean to you?" And she said, "Well, basically, when I'm in the middle of whatever it is that I'm doing a dance with a lot of different skills. I could be measuring, I could be observing, I could be wondering if I'm asking the right questions. And so it's just an interplay. But for me, I like to call it discovering, and that's what makes sense to her. And why discovering is so meaningful? She's making a contribution to the expansion of knowledge. So I asked her, I said, I don't know, maybe there's some way that you can use your hands when you're in the boardroom. And nowadays, she's got a reputation for livening up the meetings because she shows up with props, models, she uses her hands, taps right into that discovering spirit, which, as you know, is a great asset to have in the boardroom. So not only is she feeling like herself, but she's feeling like her best self. So in order for you to figure out your flow strategy, we're going to go through 3 questions. And these are the 3 questions that I was sitting on that couch that night trying to figure out, like how to get into flow on demand. And these are the 3 questions that unlock your flow so that you can recharge, refresh, and re-engage. And whenever I'm talking about flow, it could be for any industry. I could be talking to a pipe fitter or a software engineer or somebody in human resources. Whatever the job description, the process is always the same. And it starts by recreating a memory of a time when you were in the flow state. And if this is all new for you, don't worry. You're just going to observe yourself for a couple of weeks, finding a time when you slip into flow, and then you'll be able to apply these 3 questions to extract your own flow strategy. So for today's purposes, if you don't have a memory of a time when you were in flow, then think of somebody else that you know, that you've seen when they are in flow. They've lost themselves in an activity. So I have 3 volunteers that are going to come up. You could just come up over here, make your way up, and then I'll let you know when to come up on stage. We're going to go through the process of figuring out your flow strategy. And the first thing I'm going to do is a quick review. So the first thing we talked about was the entry point of flow exists at the intersection of skill and challenge. So what does this mean? So actually, we almost did 2 hours yesterday on this topic alone. That's all we did was talk about this topic. But there's something about skill and challenge. This is it's directly from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's work, that when you get the right levels of each, that it ignites flow. So the Reader's Digest version for you is, imagine these two circles as dials. Underskilled, overskilled, or just the right skills. Or challenge, the challenge is maybe under-challenged, over-challenged, or just the right amount of challenge. And keep in mind that challenge is subjective. One person's, hardcore challenge that pulls the best out of them is going to crush somebody else. So, you have to talk with yourself or other people, whoever you're working with, whether you're applying this for yourself or others, and really get clear on what are the challenges that bring out the best in you. And so this becomes an observation tool, an assessment tool. And I'll give you an example. This was last fall at a SHRM conference up in the Pacific Northwest, and this woman, she says, I knowingly hired somebody who's way overskilled for the job that they're doing, and I've been so nervous about retaining her. But now I can see that I could just have a conversation with her and ask her, what are the challenges that bring out the best in you? And to see if they could come up with a plan to create more challenge for her so that it could ignite all of her amazing skill set and help her to find more meaning, fulfillment, and joy in her work. So as you can see, there's a lot of, you could be underskilled and over-challenged, right? You could be under-challenged and kind of have the skills. It could be anything, right? So use this as an assessment for yourself and for the people that you're working with. Okay, the next review is, I've been dropping all along the key indicators of getting into flow. So here's a list. Losing sense of time, losing sense of self. This happens when that prefrontal cortex shuts down. Literally, when you lose sense of self, guess what goes bye-bye? Your internal critic. That's why people say when they feel like they're in flow, they're being, not doing. When you have that inner critic silenced, it opens you up big time to receive ideas and insights coming in from out of the blue, which is the next one on the list here. How about that sense of ease where all of a sudden in 30 minutes, you get all kinds of things done and you were much more productive than you were the last 3 days together? Okay, you just had a flow state moment. Would you like more of that? Okay. All right, so that positive feedback loop I already talked about. The more you get into it, the more you get out of it. And then experiencing more meaning, joy, and fulfillment. Okay, so your friends, your colleagues are going to come on up here. So we're going to walk you through figuring out your flow strategy. Why don't you come over here? Hi, how you guys doing? You good? You know what you're doing? We worked on it yesterday, and they probably slept on it last night. So I think I have to turn this on, right? Okay, we're going to start with name, job title, and where you work.
Letitia Baker, Vice President of Human Resources and People. Intellect Tax.
Oh, wait, here, hand her the mic.
Intellect Tax. Cassie Butler, Senior Classification Compensation Consultant with DARS.
And I'm Jamie Greenwood, HR Manager with Coastal Hospitality Solutions.
Awesome. Okay. So I have found that the more examples you hear of other people's flow strategies, the more helpful it is for you. So they all figured theirs out yesterday with me. We had a great time. And just so you know, for their help today, they're all going to get free coaching with me. Yeah. Ooh. So make sure you sign up. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through the steps. And as we go along, they're also going to share their steps. Okay? Sound good? We're going to start off with this question of where? Where are you when you get into the flow state the most? And so in order to answer this question, you have to recreate a memory of a time when you were in flow. And as I said before, if you can't think of a time right now, think of somebody else. Where are they? In the kitchen? In the boardroom? Okay? And so we're going to now listen to your colleagues and hear where they are when they get into the flow state the most.
Out for a walk. I'm at home in my home office or in the office.
And for me, it's at a live music venue.
Okay. So where are you when you get into the flow state the most? Just locate it. This is the two-part question. What are you doing on the outside, and what are you doing on the inside? So if the kitchen is it for you, you might be cooking or baking, or washing the dishes. But cooking or baking, that's what you're doing on the outside. But what are you doing on the inside? You could be doing anything. You could be experimenting. You could be socializing, right? You could be nurturing. This is as unique as you are. So ask yourself, what am I doing on the outside, and what am I doing on the inside? So let's hear what your colleagues have to say.
So on the outside, I am dancing and singing along. But on the inside, I am decompressing and, for more personal terms, healing.
On the outside, I'm reviewing job descriptions. But on the inside, I'm researching, I'm questioning, I'm troubleshooting, I'm connecting the dots.
Such a geek, right? Who's here like gets lost in an Excel spreadsheet? Where are my people? Oh yeah, okay, all right. So.
On the outside, I'm focused on self-care, and on the inside, I'm reducing stress and anxiety.
Okay. So ask yourself, if you're lost in an Excel spreadsheet, what you're doing on the outside is working on the Excel spreadsheet. But on the inside, you could be visualizing. You could be strategizing. I'm trying to remember, I worked with somebody on stage like this last summer. She worked for Disney. I can't remember what she called it, but basically it was a year-long projection on collaboration. It was collaboration, creating collaboration. That's what she was doing on the inside. Okay, why? Why is it so meaningful? Now, when you think of why, I want you to think of these very, very high, lofty goals. Values. I should say values, not goals. So we're talking about peace, love, equality, well-being. It could be self-actualization. For me, it was unity, right? Freedom of speech is another one of mine. So what are those really high values that just mean so much to you? So let's hear from your colleagues again.
It started with wellness, but it became my peace.
Became her peace.
It's me helping managers create job descriptions to be able to attract the right talent for the job they're looking for.
So, but a little bit deeper, that's pretty powerful, right? There's power in attracting just the right person. And what does that bring? I
just feel like I'm helping managers being of service to them.
Being of service, that's right, that's what we talked about. Yeah, so really for her, being of service is what's gonna fuel her when she's lost in a sea of job descriptions, right?
And I say for me is to be able to refocus. So when I'm back at work, I'm able to be of service to others and assist those employees that are coming to me with issues or whatnot. I have to be employees.
And so it's a refueling process for you. Yeah, fill your cup.
Yes.
Love it. Okay. So what you do on the inside, we're going to assemble your flow strategy now. What you do on the inside is your most compelling internal self-motivator. And knowing what you do on the inside means you can now shift into your flow state on purpose. Why it's so meaningful is your most compelling external self-motivator. And knowing why it's so meaningful means you can now shift into your flow state with purpose. And when you put them together, this is your flow strategy. And so your friends are going to demonstrate how to speak their flow strategy out loud for you now.
Reducing stress and anxiety is how I shift into flow state on purpose.
And the other one? Yeah.
Peace is how I shift into the
Flow state with purpose.
So researching and connecting dots is how I shift into flow state on purpose. And being service to managers is how I shift into the flow state with purpose.
And connecting to music is how I shift on purpose, but the desire to, or the need to be able to focus is how I shift with purpose.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you guys later. Okay. Is that helpful? Yeah. I loved how her flow strategy was from outside of work, but then it ended up coming back to work, right? Yeah. So this is your flow strategy, and this is your unique way of connecting what you love to the work that you do. It was a year into the pandemic when Adam Grant, organizational psychologist, had a big article in the New York Times. I know a lot of you are going to know what I'm talking about. And he talked about the mental health spectrum between depression and flourishing, and how a year into the pandemic, the majority of people were halfway in the middle, feeling blah and unmotivated, and he called it languishing. Remember that one? And people were so relieved. Oh, good, there's a term for what I'm feeling. But guess what? Most people don't remember the entire second half of the article. The antidote to languishing, to go from languishing up to flourishing, is getting into your flow state. Go back and read the article. Now, if you take a look, we've talked about what is flow, how do we get into it? Let's zoom out. I'm going to ask you to take 2 pictures today, so get out your phone. This is the first one. When you zoom out and you see the impact that flow state has, I tried to do my best, but here goes. Look at that list of outcomes. Flow falls under the umbrella of positive psychology. And positive psychology is about taking a look at what's working and how do we reverse engineer it so that we can increase the odds of repeating that behavior. And so by having a flow strategy and using those dials, the skill and challenge dials, you now have 2 tools to help yourself and to help others to get into flow over and over and over again. Why not use your flow strategy to love your job? Why not use the 3 questions to coach the people that you serve to love their job? Why not use the 3 questions during job interviews to make sure that your new hires love their job? I always knew I'd love playing in an orchestra, and it was that vision that kept me going during the 10 years that I struggled to get work. So it was 2 years ago when I was, a friend of mine asked to interview me on his podcast, Tyler, also a peak performance geek. And Tyler was like minute 57 into a 60-minute interview. And Tyler says this to me. He says, "Okay, Diane, so you're not 15 in your room blasting the music, and after 28 years, you're done teaching violin. You don't even play in an orchestra anymore. But you do stand center stage when you give keynotes. You do pour the core of your soul into every word you speak and every note you play. From where I sit, certainly looks like you've become the soloist. I never saw it. Never. And what I learned from Tyler that day is that these flow state fantasies, they are not pipe dreams. They are not ideas for you to shut down, brush under the rug, and discredit. They exist for you to truly see what you are capable of. Flow is the gateway to recharge, refresh, and re-engage. And flow is the gateway to being in your greatness. But wait, there's more. It has a ripple effect. And as we close, I have one more story that I really want to share with you because it highlights leading from flow and group flow for teams. So this was a coaching client of mine, Marie, a chief operating officer at a medical center, and she was having meeting issues. She said, I can't understand why people are so rude and interrupt. I get aghast every time it happens. I'm speechless. I know I have to lead differently, but I'm at a loss, mostly because as an introvert, if whatever change I make doesn't feel natural to me, I am going to burn out. So her flow strategy, where she gets into her flow state the most, is in her office. What she's doing on the outside is having one-on-one conversations with people. But on the inside, she's putting aside her thoughts and deeply listening. And why that's so meaningful is that the deeper she listens, the deeper she connects. And connection is what touches her to the core. So I just asked her, I said, is there some way that you can use this in the meetings? And she said, I think I got it. So she opened up their next meeting by stating the main objective, and that she wanted to take the time to listen to each person's point of view. And as she tapped into her deep listening superpowers, so did everyone else. Not a single interruption. And as soon as they finished hearing everybody, the room burst into this spontaneous conversation, solving all kinds of problems with innovative solutions. By setting herself up to be in flow, not only did she influence the others to be in flow, but it sparked that synergistic state of group flow. So I want you to think about your leaders and your managers leading from flow. What does their ripple effect look like? And does it even trickle into their home life as they arrive home not drained, but energized? Now, I can't promise this idyllic state on a daily basis, but what I can promise you is this. The more time you spend in flow, the more meaning, joy, and fulfillment in your everyday life. And that seed gets planted into all of the different landscapes of your life. And if there's any way that I can help you to make that happen, please let me know. It would be my honor. Your conference event team put thousands of hours, volunteer hours, into this event. Yeah. And one of the ways, we're all going to leave, but they still have work to do. And so I want you to help them out by please going through all of the sessions that you attended and fill out the evaluations. Yeah, okay. Not only would this help them, but oh my goodness, it's just going to pave the way to take next year to a whole new level. So please give them the feedback. And, special events, we associate special events with music, right? I might just happen to have a recording of my music for you. So this is, and it's set to the slides that we have today, that I've posted today. So this is the second time you need your phone. Open up your camera app. You're going to basically scan a QR code. There's going to be a pop-up window. Tap it. Type in the word music. I'm going to show you. You'll have the directions on the slide in just a second. Type in the word music. And then you're going to go through a really quick process. I'm just going to tune my violin really quickly. By the time I'm done, we'll come together for the finale, okay? When you unlock your flow and you get into that positive feedback loop, your work, instead of draining, becomes refueling. And with ideas and insights coming in from out of the blue, your thoughts are refreshed. And looking through the lens of flow, you now have a new way to re-engage. Before today, let's see, there we go. Before today, getting into flow may have been a challenge. But with the daily use of your flow strategy, it will quickly become a skill. And that means it's time for a new challenge. Unlocking your flow and being in your genius on a personal level, it's incredibly rewarding. But it's not just about you. It's your job to take your newfound skill and apply it to solving the challenges, helping other people, helping your organizations, and making the change that you want to see in this world. Understanding your flow strategy and using it as a tool, it's liberating. Repurposing how you get into flow means you could take your best self with you anywhere. I'm not asking you to learn a different way to think. I'm asking you to think differently about being in your natural state of flow. Every one of us is wired for this. Discovering your flow strategy will give you the gift to shift. So you can get into your life like a violinist and a musician gets into the music on cue.